African, African American, and Afro Caribbean brothers and sisters. Next time an African American says they ain't African, show them this video. You'll have many African Americans who deny that they African or have any connection to Africa say African American was a term quoted by Jesse Jackson to commemorate the progeny of lost African slaves. That's not true either. The earliest recorded uses of the word African American is old as America itself, and it was in 1782. Here is the document right here. It says right here, 2 sermons written by the African American, one on the capture of Lord Cornwallis to be sold by W. Woodhoff, A. Smith, and S. Saville. Well, it debunks that Jesse Jackson came in with the term, it's as old as America itself. You'll say we ain't African and yet go to church, and the 2 oldest church denominations in America have the word African in them. African Methodist Episcopal Church and African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church. Furthermore, one of the oldest churches in New York is literally named Abyssinia Baptist Church, named after Ethiopia, once named Abyssinia after Ethiopian seamen, and African American parishioners built it together. How many of y'all read this book? How many of y'all read this book? The Slave Community by John W. Blassingame. It talks about when Africans would die, okay, and have funerals, their souls would return to Africa. They always thought that their souls would return to Africa. Furthermore, the people that live in South Carolina, I'm from South Carolina, the Gullah people, which by the way is derived from the word Gullah, meaning Gullah people or Angola, had African names up until the 1940s. We know your African heritage and presence is still there because the way you speak has African grammar and syntax to it. The Gullah Geechee language is literally similar to the African brothers and sisters living in the Bahamas. Do you like drinking Coca-Cola or Coke products? Well, Coca-Cola comes from cola nuts, hence the West African region. If you are African American and you say you ain't African, or you say we ain't got no connection to Africa and that has been cut off, do me a favor. Stop eating yams, stop eating black eyed peas, stop eating okra, stop eating gumbo, stop eating sesame seed, stop eating rice, stop eating collard greens. Don't serve it on your dinner plate, don't serve it to your auntie, your grandma, your nephews, don't have it at Thanksgiving or Christmas, none of it. Because all of it is of African origin, and especially West Africa. You as an African American denying your African heritage and roots is a prime example of internalized Afrophobia. And no, I'm not going to use the word anti-blackness because at the root cause of anti-blackness is Afrophobia. And that's why I'm going to go explain later on why we should be using the word Afrophobia and not anti-blackness, because this is a prime example of it.
Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel, and if you're new here, welcome. My name is Yona. I'm an author, researcher, and genealogist, and I wanted to discuss this video because I came across it a while back, and I feel like it needs to be addressed. And instead of me, saying my commentary, showing the video, then coming back with further commentary, I just wanted to go ahead and show y'all this video off the rip because it is like 3 minutes long. I'm like, oh no, I'm not gonna make this video longer than what it needs to be. So I'm just gonna go ahead and hop right into it. But before I do that, be sure to go ahead and hit the subscribe button and the bell button on notifications to get notified when I go live and when I upload a new video. And if you are into genealogy and need help with your genealogy, check out my Patreon down below. The link is in the description box. And also check out my genealogy organizer. If you need help organizing your genealogy, I got you, boo. Check that out on Amazon. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So I know when it comes to a lot of so-called Black people, they are very, 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 very upset that other brown people, right? Because when people talk about being melanated, they really talk about being melanated because they refer to a skin tone. Melanin is what makes you dark, not melanin itself. Everyone has melanin, but not everybody has high amounts of melanin. So if you don't know, now you know. So the thing that I noticed with heavily pigmented people, I would just say, is that when someone does not follow what they believe in, it goes straight into the belittling. It goes into, well, y'all just hate yourselves. And with him, he says it's Afrophobia, which I feel like is dumb because, first of all, Afro is a hairstyle. And I know they like to press us to believe that Afro means African, but Afro also a hairstyle. And everyone who knows that afros can be found anywhere. Okay? Like afros are not only in Africa, they are in America, South America, Mexico, the Philippines, etc. So afros are not exclusive to Africans, but I digress. So this man mentioned a whole bunch of things, right? He mentioned Jesse Jackson and how people were saying how he created a term, which I have seen people say that, but I this is my comment on that. First and foremost, when people talk about Jesse Jackson, it's not so much that he created the term, it's the fact that he was elected as he was like the leader of the Negroes, and to tell the pale people what to identify as us as. We weren't even trying to hear ourselves be called black. Back in the day, talk to your elders, back in the day, being called black was like being called the N-word. Okay. You did not call your elder black because your elder already know who they are. They knew who they are, they knew where they came from. So when people start pressing all these paper genocidal terms on our elders, and of course now to us, they think it's okay, not knowing that these terms were used to make us go poof on paper, meaning to erase our existence on paper. So when this guy talks about Jesse Jackson, I'm like, okay, so you're just trying to debunk what a lot of people on the internet say. And y'all guys, listen, this is why I don't go around trying to tell people that they are indigenous or whatever, because you don't know people genealogy. And notice in this video, he did not mention genealogy not one time, not one time. Now, y'all, I don't know what it is about you melanated people, but for them, they feel like they get the upper hand when they refer to studies and all this other stuff. Well, this study says black people don't have Native American ancestry, so therefore they can't be indigenous. Okay, first of all, have you ever heard this thing called genealogy? Okay, it's a thing called genealogy, and you use genealogy to trace your ancestry. Okay, and before you say, oh, well, black people don't have documents, that is a lie. Okay, so called black people do have documents, they just tend to ignore them. Okay, secondly, he also brought up this African church, right, and talk about how, oh, African American was that term was used way back in the late 1700s, and so was this African church that was founded in the late 1700s. Y'all notice a coincidence with that? Like, really think about that. Really think about the coincidence. He says around the same time this country was founded was around the same time African American and these churches were coming out. So that should tell you something right off the jump, like, okay, your antennas should be going up. That should already be a red flag right there to you, because first of all, we know when it comes to this country, and especially with the census, that they did not want to give indigenous people what we are owed. Okay, they didn't want to give us our land, they didn't want to let us be in peace, they wanted to capture our existence, write it down on paper, all while simultaneously erasing our existence on paper. They say, oh, well, you Indian. Okay, well, I'm going to write you as something else. Okay, because on the first census, because mind you, the first census was also happening around this time too. And a lot of people could not identify with their tribes or where they come from. It had free white people, all other free persons, and slaves for the 1790 census. So obviously, a lot of people are not going to be able to identify correctly, because if you're not a pale person, they're just like, well, we don't care. Okay, we're already trying to erase indigenous people off the face of the earth. We're already trying to steal the land. We're not going to give y'all any leeway when it comes to this genealogy tip. But just because that happened does not mean that you cannot trace your ancestry. And I'm so tired of people trying to push these fake DNA ancestry tests and these fake studies that had nothing to do with us personally. Okay, I also want to pull up some things when it comes to the Gullah Geechee, because he did mention the Gullah Geechee. Now he's over here talking about, oh, well, they African, they do this and they do that. First and foremost, okay, the Gullah Geechee has been involved in numerous studies, and I came across this study in particular here, and you can find it on the National Library of Medicine website. And the title of the study is called Genetic Landscape of Gullah African Americans. Okay, and when I was reading this, I was like, oh, so in a way, they're telling us, because although they love to sit there and be like, oh, well, Gullah Geechee people are African, but in this study, it says consistent with early mitochondrial DNA and Y chromosome studies of Gullah African Americans, we found a small Native American contribution to the African American group sampled for our study. We observed that the Gullah Geechee and JHS African Americans had slightly higher Native American ancestry than have been reported in most African American groups in the U.S. This discrepancy may reflect the fact that previous studies have often used clustering methods like admixture for estimating Native American ancestral proportions, which are expected to give underestimates when the proxy population used for Native American ancestry, typically Mesoamerican, is highly genetically drifted from the true source population, southeastern U.S. Native American. In contrast, the QPADM ancestry estimation procedure explicitly accounts for a genetic drift between the source population and the proxy population and produces an unbiased estimate. In the U.S., only African Americans living in the southwest U.S. from the Thousand Genomes Project had higher Native American ancestry. So, it's crazy how when we talk about the Gullah Geechee, people like to look over that. They say, oh, well, they just African, but yet they have more indigenous American ancestry than your average, say, quote unquote, African American. And not only that, but do y'all remember that study I also talked about on my channel before? And this study is also called African American mitochondrial DNAs often match mitochondrial DNAs found in multiple African ethnic groups. Now, this title says that, but I'm going to read you, okay, what it says. So in this study, they use samples of general African American, in particular Gullah Geechee HVS-I haplotypes were compared with two databases of HVS-I haplotypes from sub-Saharan Africa and the incidence of perfect matches recorded for each sample. And in these results, right, they said when two independent African American samples were analyzed, more than half of the sampled HVS-I mitochondrial DNA haplotypes exactly match common haplotypes that were shared among multiple African ethnic groups. Another 40% did not match any sequence in the database. And fewer than 10%, listen here, you guys, fewer than 10% were an exact match to the sequence from a single African ethnic group. I'm going to say that one more time. Another 40% did not match any sequence in the database, and fewer than 10% were an exact match to a sequence from a single African ethnic group. Differences in the regional distribution of haplotypes were observed in the African database, and the African American haplotypes were more likely to match haplotypes found in ethnic groups from West or West Central Africa than those found in Eastern or Southern Africa. Fewer than 14% of the African American mitochondrial DNA sequences matched sequences from only West Africa or only West Central Africa. And you're probably thinking, what does that mean? It means that they can't trace so-called African Americans to Africa like they claim. So what are you doing with your money when it comes to these DNA ancestry tests? And mind you, Gullah Geechee was included in the study. And I can't believe that people were actually trying to clown a Gullah Geechee elder for saying that she wasn't African.
Geechee, like people can't spread their words out the way you want to do it, but it's something, as we age, because I'm 77 years old now. And as I speak, I know sometimes it come out wrong. But, you want to put it in place, but, it's hard. Hard for me to do it, We went that far in school, When you see that little girl, she correct me all the time. No, Grandma, I don't understand you too good, Grandma. I said, how you mean you can't understand me? You can understand other things, right? You can understand me. No, Grandma, I don't understand you. Anything for a while. Yeah, something. Some of them, yeah, they call me from, if I'm from Africa or from, I'm not from Africa. I'm a full-blooded American.
Oh, and I have another study for y'all. Y'all gonna love this, okay? I came across this today as well, and it says characterizing the admixed African ancestry of African Americans. Mind you, in this study, it tells us that the majority of African Americans derive their African ancestry from approximately 500,000 to 650,000 Africans that were forcibly brought to British North America as slaves during the Middle Passage. Okay, still, no millions of Africans. Okay, everybody keeps talking about, oh, millions of Africans came to North America. No, they did not. No, they did not. Because even in these scientific studies that they doing, they still saying, oh, well, it was below a million that came over here. And mind you, Henry Gates Jr. told us it was only 388,000, but he also mentions that he only has documentation of 92,000. Okay, so keep all that in mind. Keep those numbers in mind. Now, we already know they try to push off about, this African and European ancestry that so-called all African Americans have, right? Okay, because even though they said that 500,000 to 650,000 African slaves supposedly came here, they still want us to believe that the millions of people who are identified as African Americans came from that percentage, okay? Which is a load of baloney. But anyway, I'm going to read y'all some snippets of sentences from the conclusions from this study. So I'm gonna start where it says, we found that all the African Americans are admixed in the African component of their ancestry, with estimated contributions of 19% West, for example, Mandinka, 63% West Central, for example, Yoruba, and 14% Southwest Central or Eastern, for example, Bantu speakers, with little variation among individuals. Furthermore, we found little evidence of genetic structure within the African component of ancestry in African Americans, but significant structure related to the proportion of European ancestry. These results are consistent with mating patterns among African Americans that are unrelated to African ancestral origins, cast doubt on the general utility of mitochondrial or Y chromosome markers alone to delineate the full African ancestry of African Americans, and show that the proportion of African ancestry is the leading source of stratification bias in genetic case control studies of African Americans. Okay, so what does this mean? What does this mean? It means that how are they going to sit here and prove someone is African if they found little evidence of genetic structure within the African component of ancestry in African Americans? So they literally telling us right to our face, hey, we can't find it like that. Okay, we can't find it like that. Well, we gonna say you African though, but we can't find it like that. And I also want to point out here too, where it says our results also indicate that the genetic architecture of African Americans is distinct from that of Africans. They are saying that so-called African Americans is distinct from that of Africans, that the genetic architecture of so-called African Americans is distinct from that of Africans. So honestly, y'all, the information is there. People are just choosing not to see it. They're choosing not to acknowledge it. And all science aside, we should really be looking at our genealogy. F what they said in school. Forget what this person over here talking about. You need to do your genealogy to see what it is for you. Because yes, we can sit here and talk about how the genetic architecture of so-called African Americans is distinct from Africans. They can sit here and say all of these different things, but you need to know the truth about you. Not everyone is the same. Yes, sure, not all. so-called African Americans are African. You need to do your own family research and stop trying to speak for brown people as a collective. Because what does those documents say? And I'm so tired of people having this superiority complex when it comes to Africans. And this is why Africans feel like they can sit there and talk to us any way they can and want to, because people will sit there and be so up far they booty holes. Because first and foremost, he over here talking about, oh, y'all need to stop eating this, y'all need to stop eating that. First and foremost, 600 out of the 640 food crops in Africa originated in America. Does that sound like the motherland to you? Does it sound like these people have it together? No, they don't. I'm so over people having this superiority complex when it comes to Africans, like literally. Because let me tell you something, people like him, they would sit there and try to knock down other you melanated indigenous American people, saying that we're actually black and we're this and we're that, but sit there and get mad, right? When Europeans and mixed natives and all those other people come to him and tell him to go back to Africa and all this other stuff. And I guarantee you, he is one of those hoteps that will say, oh, well, black people were here too. We was here thousands of years ago. You ever heard of all mix? We all mix. Oh, now you want to claim us when they tell you to go back to Africa? No, 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 no. Keep that same energy. Because let me tell you something. People love to degrade and negate our experiences as brown indigenous people until it's time to start claiming us. When they want to prove a point in some type of pointless debate they having. You know what? Y'all can keep that. Okay, y'all can keep that. And if you did not learn anything from this video, learn how to do your genealogy. Okay? I have a whole Patreon dedicated to genealogy. Join it. You'll learn something. Okay? Because all this, oh, well, you African and oh, well, you just pretending and blah blah blah. Stop. Stop, stop, stop. Stop assuming other people's heritage when you don't know them. Okay? That's why I stopped debating with people about other people's heritage and about my heritage. They don't know me. And they ain't never gonna get to know me because I will never allow anybody so hateful and negative to get to know me. Like, no, thank you. But not only that, but because they don't even know me. They have not looked at my genealogy documents. They know nothing of my family. So why would I let someone who know nothing about me tell me who I am? When I can sit here and interview my elders and research my family history to know who I am. We have to stop trying to speak for everybody else just because they brown and because they may share skin tone with you or share a similar phenotype with you. That does not matter. Look at those genealogy records because that's going to tell you who you are, where you're from, and where your ancestors come from. And yes, if you do have enslaved African ancestors, I'm pretty sure the documentation is going to tell you, because guess what? People have shown me their documents of it saying African slave or whatever from that point of time. And yes, census takers did know the difference between Africans and a quote unquote American Negroes. There's a difference between the two. I have actually seen documents of other people's genealogy where it said someone was African and listed the name of their African parents. Those records exist. Look for them instead of claiming African ancestry that you don't even know that you truly have. People always say, "Oh well, black people don't have that much Native American ancestry because the studies say so." Uh, no. You're gonna have to look at those genealogy records. Stop relying on other people's information to tell you who you are. You are an adult. You're grown. Learn the truth. And if you don't know how to do your genealogy, you start with yourself. Interview your elders, ask them about their elders, get their birth dates, where they were born, if they're deceased, go to their tombstones, write down the information. You have all these resources at your fingertips to know the truth about your ancestry. Use it. okay, use it. And I'm sorry to make this video so long because that was not my intention. But I want to really point out how he is really naming things in his video that has nothing to do with people on a personal level. You're mentioning a church, you're mentioning food, you're mentioning a source that claims that we were being called African American in the late 1700s, whatever. What does that have to do with people personally? Because I could get where you're coming from if you was talking to a particular person and say, hey, on your documents, it says that your ancestors went to this African Methodist church and blah, blah, blah. Then I'd be like, okay. But that's not the case here. People are just doing a lot of collective speaking, and that needs to stop. You need to do your research, your ancestry research, and stop projecting what you think people are onto them. Okay? Okay. Thank y'all guys for watching my video. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the bell button on notifications to get notified when I go live and when I upload a video. Thank y'all guys for watching. Until the next time. Bye.